Hello, I'm Marcus Grodi. Welcome to the third episode of the Science Before Science, a guide to thinking and believing. I'm here with renowned physicist Dr. Anthony Rizzi, the director of the Institute for Advanced Physics. He is our guide in firming up the foundations of our thinking. We've seen how the deep decay in our culture calls us to return to truth. We found we need both knowledge and belief, as a bird needs two wings to soar. Both faith and reason are needed. We saw in the last episode how important the distinction between knowledge and belief is, and that knowledge comes before belief. Also, even if it's just those things that we've learned directly in the process of living, we know a lot of things.
We even pulled a couple nuggets of gold from our common experience and looked at them in clear light.
Dr. Rizzi, explain to the home audience, where do we get our knowledge?
This is very important. We get it through our senses. Everything we know comes through our senses. When we start learning as tiny babies, we know the things we touch, see, and hear long before we even know ourselves as selves.
It reminds me of a particular scene from Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol. We see it on the screen.
Sir.
What do you mean by coming in here at this time of day?
I'm very sorry, sir. I am behind my time, sir.
You are indeed. Step this way, Mr. Cratchit, please.
It's only once a year, sir. It won't be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir.
I'm sure you were. Well, we won't beat about the bush, my friend. I'm not going to stand this sort of thing any longer, which leaves me no alternative but to raise your salary. I haven't taken leave of my senses, Bob. I've come to them.
This is a great scene to help us remember year after year the importance of the senses. In that time of year when our hemisphere is at its coldest and darkest season, Scrooge can remind us that we are made to know through the senses. Right in the middle of that cold, dark season, Christmas recalls that God became man. He came to address us through our senses. This will make us remember to come to our senses, for we really need to remember that all we know comes through the senses.
Yet don't our senses often deceive us? We have a segment on this also on the screen.
So am I just a front without a back?
No.
Well, do you see a back? Is that why you're saying that?
No.
So you can't trust your eyes then, huh?
Yes, I can, because I can go behind you like this and see your back.
Okay, so your sight's not wrong. It just doesn't tell you everything at once, right?
Right.
But you can interpret it wrong. If you just never saw a front before, you might get confused and think, oh, I mean, that's all there is whatever I'm looking at. But that would be your fault, right? Not your eyes.
Right.
Okay. Well, our senses are limited, but that's different from saying they deceive us. For example, I see you right in front of me now. If I were to conclude that you were just a front and have no back, that would be an error, not be an error of the senses. It would just be a limitation. It's a limitation, not an error. I can ask you to turn around, or I can walk around behind you and see the full 3D you. So it's not an error in the senses, but in our perception or understanding of what the senses present.
Can you give us another example?
Yeah, let's look at this pencil in the water. It looks bent, doesn't it?
Yep, sure does.
Okay, kids, see, we have a pencil here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick this pencil in the water, and we're going to see if your senses are reliable or not. Now, what do you see, Mary Allison?
Looks like it's bent.
Looks like it's bent, doesn't it? Huh?
Yeah.
What about you, Leona Claire? Looks like it's bent. Now, when I take it out, is it bent?
No.
So, What's going on there? Do you know?
I think it's an optical illusion.
It's an optical illusion, right? Can you explain what happened there? We can check it, right? Because it's not our eyes that are bad, right? Because I take it out, and that's how I tell it's normal, right? And I put it in, and now it's bad. Do you know why how that optical illusion works? Do you know? Does the light go straight in there, or does it go crooked when it comes out? What do you think? Like if you look at me, how do I look? Do I look funny? Is it going straight through?
No.
No, it's not. So you're seeing the light the way it really is, right? But it's being bent. So you see it being bent. It's kind of like a what? What does that? What else do you know that bends light like that?
A prism.
A prism. Good.
A prism.
Do you know another one, Leanna Claire, that does that? You might have seen your brother burn leaves with it. And you might have seen Sherlock Holmes use one. Magnifying glass bends light, doesn't it? Good. So our eyes aren't bad. It's just that this is changing the light, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Good. And another example is I remember eating in a restaurant in New Orleans which had the eating area in a giant fish tank dividing the eating area from the lobby. The surface of the water in the tank just reached the top of people's necks. So as people walked by in the lobby, through the tank, the people looked as if their heads were disconnected and following back behind their bodies. It was funny.
Well, then why isn't this an error in our senses?
Because we are actually seeing the total physical situation as it is. The light is really changed by the water as it moves through it. It is bent, the light is, as we physicists say, it's refracted as it goes from air to water and then back again. The light is really coming from the angle we see it coming from. It's our understanding of what we see that is confused. It is our perception, our understanding of what we see that leads us to think that the body is disconnected from the head or that the pencil is bent. Of course, by looking at various angles, and in this case of the pencil in the water, we could take it out like so, and we can see for ourselves that it's not bent. What's really happening is that the pencil is not broken, and neither are the people's heads, of course, and we see that by, in both cases by moving around a little bit.
So in the end, it's really our senses that tell us what is wrong in our perception.
Exactly. All we know comes through the senses. In the normal state, again, our senses are limited, not in error. They're limited, not in error.
Not recognizing and understanding this can cause real problems, can't it? Didn't you once tell me about a woman that you found on the web who had given up thinking that there was any real truth because she lacked an understanding of this very point?
Yeah, so we have that on screen. The year is 1961, and very few people have a color TV. This is important.
But it's a black and white TV. How can there be color?
The little girl was me. I knew what I saw back then. You know, I think back to that Captain Kangaroo with the spinning disc. I think back to that many times in my dealings with color and color theory, particularly when writers would fall into that easy trap of speaking as though colors were out there when they're really in here. They're always and they're only in here. It was a powerful lesson, not only in color, but also in the nature of knowledge and reality and experience.
She really thinks colors are simply in her head.
Yes, but she could have stopped the wheel if she had one and understand that the wheel is black and white, though it's not understood yet how this happens. It's clear that the disc is spinning too fast. We see it kind of blur as we spin it up to see what's really happening.
Let's see that wheel on screen. Go to black and white images before we start this.
We can see this as we increase the speed of the disc, as I said, and the broken lines that now blend into continuous lines are an example of our senses not being able to keep up. Something like this is happening here. Remember, Isaac Newton found that white light is composed of a rainbow of colors. So when it's moving fast, we somehow get a glimpse of the composition. So we see the colors because our senses are limited. We see the composition. We cannot clearly see a thing moving beyond a certain speed any more than we can see both sides of a thing at the same time.
It's very interesting.
It's quite amazing, this world God has made, so is our ability to understand its complexity. Notice at any point we could say that this is just too hard and give up trying. This is a sin of despair. God gave us a mind so that we may know Him and love Him in this life and the next. If we want to know an artist, we should spend some time with his artwork. And in the case of God, that artwork is His creation, all of creation.
And God gave us a body to learn about His creation through the senses.
Yes, that's the only natural way He gave us to know. The church of which St. Joan of Arc said, "All I know is the person of Christ and the church are the same," has respected our nature. Even God's supernatural grace comes through physical, sensible means. As we know, the 7 sacraments are all physical. We can taste, smell, hear, see, and feel each sacrament. Each invokes multiple senses. The sacramentals and the devotions of the church are all channels that use the physical. This is true even of things that seem least physical. For example, the very words of Christ in the Bible are passed in physical books by those who say words aloud. So the normal means of knowing is through the senses. Of course, God is not limited by this, and thus doesn't confine Himself only to this means, yet we do things according to their nature. Thankfully, there are few who would jump from a cliff expecting that God would keep them from falling to the bottom and getting hurt.
This would be to go directly against the nature God gave us and to deny that He gave it to us for a reason.
Exactly, and it's an incredible nature He has given us. Through it, one can know His creation and Him.
So we do know through the senses, and they are reliable. What therefore is knowledge, and how does it happen? When we learn something, is it like the regular change that we've already been discussing? For example, is it like when I eat something and get fatter?
Yeah, good point. When we want to understand something, we have to return to what we can see and hear and touch, etc. So we need to understand ordinary change first, and then we can understand knowledge as some kind of different type of change.
So it's different from ordinary change.
Yeah.
We talked about ordinary change last time. We said it's the actuality of a thing being lost and then replaced by another. Let's take the example of a tree full of apples.
Yeah, initially the apples are green, and then they change to red. Green is lost, red is gained. Something that actually is the greenness of the apple becomes something that was only there potentially before, which is the redness. This is called a change of property. Remember, red is a property because it must exist in another.